The Sweet Sound of Success show is brought to you by the Mentor Studio. The Mentor Studio is an exclusive mentoring and training program for social influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, and startups, bringing personal development to the underserved around the world. And brought to you by Success Strategists. Simple strategies that work to develop your business with flow and ease using proven strategies and the right tactics. This is the Sweet Sound of Success with Sue Wilhite, Success Attraction Expert. Scott Warmuth is the entrepreneur behind his law offices and podcast. He brings in something unique when it comes to helping clients that other offices don't have. Someone who will walk clients through every step of their case with sensitivity, understanding, and excellent legal and moral support. On his podcast, Scott brings his inquisitive mind that draws out the best in each guest and their stories. So please welcome Scott Wermuth to my show. Welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. I'm so delighted that I get to interview you. You must have some really good stuff to share with the audience. And for those of you who have not seen or heard this show before, this is subtitled The Hero's Journey for the Entrepreneur's Soul. And it's about the entrepreneurial journey as postulated by Joseph Campbell, who was the great mythologist, and created a cycle that he identified called the hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey has 16 pieces to it. We're not going to do those. We're not going to do all of them. It's going to be only 5 pieces, which I found to be really relevant to entrepreneurs and business owners. And those 5 pieces are the ordinary beginning. Nobody's ordinary. The call to action. What brought you to being an entrepreneur, owning your own business? What in the world made you do that? The big hairy monsters that you get to play with. Now, Joseph Campbell calls it slaying the dragon. But I don't want to harm any dragons. They're ecologically necessary, I'm sure. And so we talk about playing with the big hairy monsters because sometimes it's overcoming one of those challenges that brings you to being an entrepreneur. And sometimes being an entrepreneur brings up these challenges. And so you get to play with them on either side of that line. And then 2 things that I think are really important. One is guides. Coaches, mentors, folks that help, anybody who supports the entrepreneur on their journey, gives them aid, ideas, direction, all that sort of thing, because no entrepreneur really does it by themselves. And if they're not getting help, they're not going to succeed. So there's got to be something, and I love to share and bust the myth that everybody is doing it by themselves. And then finally, the journey home, because sometimes entrepreneurs are not necessarily understood by people who are not on the entrepreneurial journey, and therefore they get a little squirrely about what's going on. Now, there are some entrepreneurs that, it's really easy to understand why you do that, but in some families, the idea of going and striking it out on your own, not having a regular paycheck, is just a bizarre concept. Here we have Scott Wermuth. What was your ordinary beginning?
Well, my ordinary beginning was a wonderful family and childhood. And, I grew up at a time which in many ways, at least my generation, I'm a boomer. So, we look back and that might have been one of the most at the early ages, one of the most peaceful, happy, content times to grow up in the history of America. We had everything. We, at least me as a person in my particular demographic. I mean, we have to really acknowledge that not everybody had everything. But I grew up in a surrounding, in a neighborhood, in a family, in a just a cultural, I guess, place that really was probably had never happened before in the history of the world. So, I mean, I was an ordinary kid, but I grew up with a great family and a great experience, great schooling, and this type of thing. But in every other way, I was no different than anyone else. I was an ordinary, but maybe perhaps more curious person than others. So I've often tried to identify what was it that was so special about me that led me to have this extraordinary life. Why was I so lucky? Why was I given this opportunity and many people weren't? So, you know, I grew up, I was an ordinary person, but there was something different about me that, you know, I had no control over. So perhaps I was born that way. I don't know, but something different that has allowed me to, you know, use my curiosity and just use my genuine interest in things to just keep exploring and keep moving in a sense.
Right, right. And figure out how things worked.
Right. I mean, yeah, have to sort of experience things and take the lesson, you know, as you're experiencing them.
Right, right. So what was your call to action? Did you start out wanting to be a lawyer? Was that a big goal, or was there, you know, little detours along the way?
Well, that's interesting too. I had never really known a lawyer growing up. My own history was working in newspapers. My father had been a newspaper writer, editor, publisher at various times. So this is how I grew up with this kind of sort of exposure. And when I was in college, actually, I was in community college in Seattle, and I had the opportunity to work as part of an externship for the state attorney general's office in the state of Washington. And this was the first real experience, direct experience I had working around lawyers. And I worked in the consumer protection division or department of that. So I was able to see firsthand, you know, people have a problem, but there is a way to solve it. There is a legal way to go about resolving a problem. And I just saw the power that you could have if it were exercised properly, you know, and appropriately, but to help people. And I genuinely, at that time, I was probably 19 or 20. And I thought, you know, this is something, as a writer, you can influence, but here, almost more directly, you can help somebody. So that was really what you might call an action, call to action, or a wake-up call, or just an understanding of what can be done if you have a certain type of education and a certain type of desire to help.
Right.
So that was kind of the first step. And I went on after that. I continued actually in the newspaper business for a while. I went into the Peace Corps. So the Peace Corps was also one of these very I consider bold actions that a person can take, where you separate yourself from everything that's familiar. But what was the purpose? To help. And so I got that I would say there's a satisfaction to helping people,
Yes.
to giving them something, whether it's a way to see something, a way to understand something, whether it's money, food, just many ways that you can directly help people. So that was a great experience. And as soon as I got out of the Peace Corps, I started law school, because I knew that would be the next, bold action I could take to influence not only my own career, but influence other people as well. But the funny thing is, I didn't go to law school expecting to practice law. I went to law school because I wanted the education, because I wanted to learn about law.
Right.
And I saw this great profession, and I wanted to be exposed to it, kind of immerse myself in it. I never anticipated I would actually practice law. I anticipated I might become a foreign service worker, or the thing about law school, you can do anything you want.
Right.
And so, I could have continued as a writer. I could have continued working in a foreign environment. I could have, gone into teaching. I could have done anything. But sort of the next thing that influenced me was my third year of law school. I had a roommate who was a lawyer from Taiwan who had come over to the US. And he said, Scott, there's a big need for attorneys in the Chinese community. Let me take you up to, I went to University of San Diego. He said, let me take you up to Monterey Park, Los Angeles, and show you our community, our Chinese community. Maybe you'll be interested in opening an office there. And that's what it led to. So I, upon graduation and being sworn in, I actually opened a law office and began practicing general practice. But, immigration was a big thing for the community. I did a lot of specialty immigration work. But so that was the beginning. And so 38 years later, I'm still here.
So just as a point of coincidence, I grew up in Chinatown in San Francisco.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And spent the first 8 or 9 years, somewhere in there, in Chinatown, playing with the kids in Chinatown, not speaking a word of Chinese. Very few of them spoke English. And we got along just fine. But I became sort of immersed in Chinese culture and, the Chinese way of thinking and that whole thing.
Wow, that's a great exposure.
Right. And both of my parents were what you might call Asiaphiles. My mom had spent a number of years in Japan, 4 or 5 years in Japan. And my dad had spent, he was in a non-combat position in Korea.
Oh, wow.
During the Korean War. So they both had a huge respect for the Asian community. And my best friend growing up was Japanese, another Japanese, Filipino, and Chinese. I didn't have any white friends growing up.
Wow. I think that was a great environment, wasn't it? You could see so much diversity.
Yes. So I think it's absolutely fabulous that you went to the Chinese community and said, "Here, let me help. Let's do this." That's so great.
And again, though, you can see how luck plays a part in it. It was not my design. It was there I am in the third year of law school. I need to start making decisions. What am I going to do? But here was an opportunity that presented itself.
And you listened.
I was always open to ideas.
Right.
And that's very important, I think.
It's hugely important, hugely important. Now, what were some of the challenges, what I call the big hairy monsters that you got to play with? What were some of the challenges besides up until the third year of law school, not knowing what you were going to do? What were some of the things that you got to play with?
Well, after I started my office, for instance, money, always money, right? How am I going to survive? How am I going to finance this? How am I going to pay payroll?
Right.
You know, I mean, the number of sleepless nights, could not be counted, but I mean that, everybody faces that. So, and then, for instance, there were other things, language barriers,
right,
cultural barriers, because I'm practicing in a community that until, a few days ago was completely foreign and unknown to me. And so I needed people to help me, people I could trust. And I am so lucky to have had Alan Chong, who was my roommate, who was the person who brought me into the community as a person I could trust 100%.
Right.
And what he did for me, I can never forget that he was there to help me every step of the way, not just introductions, but just in guiding me through this very, this community I had never known before.
Right.
So that was important. And, within 2 years, I had gone to China and lived in China. I taught law in China at the invitation of the Chinese government in 1986 and 1987. So I had this opportunity. I just needed to keep, I would say, opening my eyes to where I was, what I was doing, who are these people that I'm helping, where did they come from, what is their story. So that's what, that's been a journey for me, but it's also been a monster. How do you deal with this completely different culture,
mindset and expectations, and
yes,
it's not just language. I'm trying to think of what somebody called it. There was a cultural consultant that I heard speak once, and she called it the something dance. And now I can't
yeah,
something is, but it's mindset, it's body language, it's inflection,
yes,
and especially with an inflected language like Chinese, the various
exactly.
dialects of Chinese.
I was so lucky that I had been in the Peace Corps and
Right.
had studied cross-cultural training.
Right.
And so I could understand that, there's no direct translations. You may have word for word translations, but what is the meaning? What does it really mean?
Right. Eat the wax frog is the famous one, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola directly translates as
yes.
wax frog.
You can't do that. And, and if you don't have that person who is there to be honest and tell you things, that knows both, cultures, knows both languages, knows, what is really happening. And so there are a lot of mistakes that, I did make, I am making, I will make, but there's just so it's so important to have that person that you can trust. Oh, I mean persons, because of course it goes beyond just one. So, I was lucky. I did get married into the Chinese community, and of course that was again a person I could really trust, that could tell me, the truth, what is happening. You may think this, but what is really happening, so yeah, I would say that was always a big issue. And self-doubt, self-confidence, self-image, all of those are more personal types of monsters that you always deal with as well.
Yeah. Wow. So you talked about I think you said his name was Scott.
Alan Cheng.
Alan, yeah. And your wife. Who else would you consider mentors or guides or coaches or anything like that you'd like to call out?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it started in my childhood. I always had an adult figure that I felt close to, outside of my family, of course, my family, but always someone outside of that. When I had a paper route, my district manager, was treated me special, and I just try to impress upon people, young people, the importance of having relationships with people outside of your own generation, both up and down. But of course, when you're young, it's mainly up. The things that you can learn, the things that if you have an open, questioning mind, the things that you can learn, they take you farther than if you were just within a, just your own age group, let's say.
Right.
So, but anyway, when I started my law practice, I was very lucky to have next door to me a person who kind of started to guide me, because of course I knew nothing. And that was Frank Frisenda. And he, from day one, I opened my office. He, for no apparent reason, other than he was a great man, he helped me. He guided me and directed me to just understanding things that had to be done in the practice of law that I didn't know. I had no experience. And so Frank was this wonderful influence for over 30 years. And then just continually, through the practice, I have had numerous people that out of the kindness of their heart really, will, this is another thing, people, I have this belief that people want to help people.
Bingo.
People want to help people,
they do.
But a lot of people are afraid to accept that help, or don't see it. But I just try to encourage people to really take advantage of what other people are willing to, they just want to help you. Don't be afraid of people.
Yes.
So, I know there are bad people in the world, but you do have to learn to identify that as well. But anyway, I've kind of been more of that person with the optimistic viewpoint. And I think it's good to have some of that.
Well, I personally think that human beings are wired to help each other because we're social beings.
Yes.
We're wired to do that.
Right. Yeah.
99% of us are willing to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain percentage who are miswired, or they've got things backwards, or they've had bad experiences. And so they're not going to help people, and they may actively harm people.
Yeah.
That's when people tell me, oh, everybody is selfish. It's like you're looking at the wrong end of the telescope.
Yeah. I mean, you can find that for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, that's how I believe as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So were there any folks in your immediate environment when you decided to open a practice, particularly a white guy going to the Chinese community and opening up a law practice to support the Chinese community, which I think is fabulous.
Yeah.
Were there any people who thought otherwise?
Actually, no. There were people, I mean, my best friend till today, or one of my best friends till today, Blaine Johnson, who has also been one of my mentors since I was about age 20.
Mm.
And when I told him I was going to go to law school, I think he was a little bit disappointed because he felt maybe it would be a little bit restraining on my mind, or would, put me into a certain way of seeing things where I wouldn't keep, the open mind, because Blaine was and is a great journalist, a great writer, a great thinker. And he saw me that way as well. And he was afraid maybe I'd be narrowing myself. So he was a bit, I think, disappointed, although, in retrospect, he's not. But other than that, to be honest, I haven't had any negative reaction to what I did. And I've seen a lot of support, actually.
That's great.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I love hearing that.
Yeah. Again, I was lucky,
Yeah. Good for you.
Right. I just really haven't ever felt any friction with anybody in what I'm doing. And I'm thankful to the Chinese community for being so receptive of what we've done. But we came in with good intentions and maintained good intentions. And my philosophy is really, quality work, quality service. And I think that's been recognized. And the people that we have built in our office, as the office has grown, and we have brought in people who have the same way of thinking. And, we've been very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Scott. This has been a fabulous
Thank you.
interview. I love it. It seems like almost every episode, there is some interesting point that comes up, which I love. I mean, there are 7.5 billion people on the planet, and we're all different. And we're all the same, right? And
yes, I believe that.
Yeah. And I just love these stories of similarity and difference, and being able to bring that all together into this unique blend.
And that's that curiosity, isn't it?
Yes.
Just that is such a great trait or attribute in a person. And I just love to see it developed.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for being on my show. I really enjoyed this interview.
Yeah, thank you. It was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned that I'm a co-host on a podcast as well. And one of the things that we look to do is just to find the unique character of each of our guests as well. And so if I could mention the name of the podcast.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you have any, do you want to mention your podcast or your practice and let people?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, as far as my practice, our website is law888.com. And the people who are familiar with Asian societies will recognize why the 888 is there. It's a lucky number. Yeah. But again, that's law888.com, and that's our website. And then as far as our podcast, it's called the Sgv Master Key Podcast. Sgv stands for San Gabriel Valley, which is where Monterey Park, Pasadena, it's where the large segment of the Chinese community lives in the Southern California area. So that's Sgv Master Key Podcast. And that is, I'm just looking at the site here. It's www.sgvmasterkey.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And we will have those links in the afterward, in the show notes, and all of the usual places.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, we want to help promote you as a guest. This is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the great work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank the viewers and listeners of The Sweet Sound of Success. What are your dreams for your business? You know what drives me crazy? Really smart business owners denying their talents because they've been taught it has to be hard, because they've been taught that they don't deserve their gifts, that they're not worth anything. They've been taught that their gender means they can't express their genius. I'm Sue Wilhite, and I want you to have access to your genius. I want you to go out and rock the world with your genius. So I created the Call to Action coaching program. It's all about getting to the heart of you and what you've got to share with the world to make a profitable business that thrives and allows you to make a difference in the world. Click the link to sign up for the Call to Action coaching program today. Don't let your genius go unnoticed.